The morning sun cast long shadows across the golden wheat fields of New Haven. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the colony headquarters, watching the farmers begin their daily work. The sight never got old for him. 50,000 people had made this world their home, and every day brought new progress. Jake had been the colony administrator for 8 years now. He remembered when New Haven was just empty grasslands and a few prefab buildings. Now it was a thriving community with schools, hospitals, markets, and homes where families raised their children. The colonists had built something beautiful here, something worth protecting. Dr. Lisa Carter walked up beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Jake and joined him in watching the morning activity below. Lisa ran the Agricultural Research Division, and her work had made New Haven one of the most productive farming colonies in human space. "The new grain varieties are doing well," Lisa said, taking a sip of her coffee. "We should have enough surplus this year to trade with the nearby systems." Jake nodded. Trade was important for New Haven. The colony was far from Earth, on the very edge of human space. They depended on good relationships with their alien neighbors to survive. The Vorthon traders came by every few months, bringing manufactured goods in exchange for food and raw materials. The crystal miners from Kepler Station visited twice a year. Even the gas collectors from the outer system sometimes stopped by for supplies. It was a peaceful existence. That was exactly what most of the colonists wanted when they left Earth behind. They were tired of the crowded cities and endless regulations. Here on New Haven, they could live simple lives and raise their families in clean air and open spaces. Ben Hughes, the colony's security chief, appeared in the doorway. His presence was reassuring rather than worrying. Crime was almost non-existent on New Haven. Ben's main job was coordinating search and rescue operations when someone got lost in the wilderness or helping with emergency medical situations. "Morning, Jake." "Lisa," Ben said with a friendly smile. "Just wanted to let you know the patrol ship spotted some weather moving in from the east. Looks like we might get some rain this afternoon." Jake was grateful for the heads up. Rain was always welcome on New Haven. The colony's irrigation systems were good, but natural rainfall made everything grow better. "Thanks, Ben. I'll make sure the farmers know to secure anything that might blow around." Ben had been a military man before coming to New Haven, but that life seemed far behind him now. The colony had no real defenses to speak of. There was the single patrol ship that Ben piloted for routine checks of the system, and a few small arms in the security office, but nothing more. They had never needed anything more. The colony's location helped keep them safe. New Haven was in a quiet sector where the major galactic powers rarely bothered to patrol. The nearest military base was weeks away by faster-than-light travel. Most ships that passed through were merchants or explorers, not soldiers. Ambassador Kyle Watson had arrived on New Haven 3 years ago to handle diplomatic relations with the alien species in the region. It was mostly ceremonial work. The aliens had shown little interest in human affairs, and humans had been equally content to mind their own business. Kyle spent most of his time helping coordinate trade agreements and cultural exchanges. The children of New Haven had grown up knowing aliens as trading partners and occasional visitors. They played games in the streets without fear, went to school to learn about farming and engineering, and dreamed of exploring the stars someday. Their parents had given them a childhood that was both safe and full of wonder. Dr. Lisa Carter's research station was one of the pride points of the colony. She had developed new crop strains that could grow in New Haven's unique soil conditions. Her work fed not just the colonists, but also provided surplus for trade. The research station also served as a school where young people could learn agricultural science. The colony's medical facility was small but well-equipped. Dr. Sarah Williams had been the chief medical officer since the early days of the settlement. She had delivered over 200 babies on New Haven and had watched them grow into healthy children. The colonists trusted her completely, and she took pride in keeping everyone healthy. Communications Officer Amy Johnson worked from the colony's Central Communications Hub. She maintained contact with Earth, though messages took weeks to travel the vast distances involved. She also coordinated with passing ships and handled emergency communications. Amy had become an expert at jury rigging, equipment to work in New Haven's sometimes challenging conditions. The colony ran on a simple democratic system. Important decisions were made by vote in town hall meetings that everyone could attend. Jake Morrison was elected administrator, but his job was more about coordination than command. The colonists were self-reliant people who preferred to solve problems through cooperation rather than authority. Manufacturing on New Haven was limited but sufficient for basic needs. The colonists could produce simple tools, building materials, and basic electronics. For more complex items, they depended on trade with other systems. This arrangement had worked well for over a decade. The colonists had built their homes to last. Most were simple but comfortable structures, designed to withstand New Haven's weather patterns. Gardens surrounded many homes, where families grew vegetables and flowers. The colony had a park in the center of town, where people gathered for festivals and community events. Education was important to the colonists. They had built a good school system that taught both practical skills and traditional subjects. Many young people stayed on New Haven to continue their families' work, while others left to explore the galaxy or get advanced education on other worlds. New Haven had its own small spaceport that could handle cargo ships and passenger vessels. The landing facilities were basic but functional. Most arriving ships were traders or supply vessels, though occasionally tourists would stop by to see what frontier life was like. The evening brought families together for dinner and conversation. Children played in the streets while adults discussed the day's work and made plans for tomorrow. It was the kind of life that people on crowded, industrialized worlds could only dream about. As night fell over New Haven, Jake Morrison made his final rounds of the day. The colony was quiet and peaceful. The wheat fields rustled gently in the evening breeze. Lights glowed warmly in windows across the settlement. Everything was exactly as it should be. Jake had no way of knowing that this would be the last normal evening New Haven would ever see. Far out in space, ships were already moving toward the colony. Ships that carried beings who saw humans not as neighbors or trading partners, but as obstacles to be removed. The first sign of trouble came from Amy Johnson in the communications center. She had been monitoring routine traffic when her instruments detected multiple ships approaching the system. The signatures were unlike anything in her database of known vessels. Amy immediately contacted Jake Morrison and Ben Hughes. Within minutes, both men were in the communications center, studying the incoming data. The ships were large, much larger than the typical traders who visited New Haven. More concerning was their formation. They moved like a military fleet. "I count 12 vessels," Amy reported, her voice tense. "They're not responding to standard hailing frequencies. I've tried human, Vorthan, and universal trade languages." Ben Hughes studied the tactical display with growing concern. His military training, dormant for years, suddenly felt very relevant again. "Those formations, that's not a trading convoy. That's a battle group." Jake felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. New Haven had no defenses against even a single warship, let alone 12. Keep trying to contact them, Amy. Maybe their communications are just different from ours. The alien fleet entered New Haven's system without slowing. They moved with purpose and precision, heading directly for the colony world. Ben quickly calculated their approach vector and estimated they would arrive in orbit within 6 hours. Ambassador Kyle Watson arrived at the communications center, still adjusting his formal diplomatic clothing. As the colony's only trained diplomat, he would handle any first contact situation. Kyle had experience dealing with alien cultures, though usually in much more controlled circumstances. "Have we been able to establish communication yet?" Kyle asked, reviewing the data on the approaching ships. Amy shook her head. "Nothing. They're not even acknowledging our transmissions. It's like they're ignoring us completely." The next few hours passed slowly. The alien ships continued their approach while the colonists tried everything they could think of to establish contact. Kyle had Amy broadcast formal diplomatic greetings in every language they knew. Ben tried military communication protocols. Nothing worked. As the ships entered orbit around New Haven, their true size became apparent. Each vessel was massive, easily 10 times larger than the colony's single patrol ship. Their design was angular and aggressive, built for war rather than exploration or trade. Commander Elena Ross piloted the patrol ship up from the surface to attempt face-to-face contact. Elena was one of the few colonists with space combat training, though her ship was armed with nothing more than mining lasers and emergency flares. "This is Commander Elena Ross of the New Haven Colonial Authority," she transmitted as she approached the alien fleet. "Please identify yourselves and state your intentions in this system." For the first time, the aliens responded. The transmission came through clearly, though the voice was harsh and mechanical. Universal translation software converted the alien speech into understandable words. "Inferior species. You occupy territory claimed by the Zephyrian Dominion. This system belongs to us by right of conquest. You will evacuate immediately." Kyle Watson felt his blood run cold. These were not traders or explorers. They were conquerors, and they saw New Haven as an obstacle to be removed. Elena tried to maintain diplomatic protocol despite the hostile message. "We are peaceful colonists who have lived here for over 10 years. We have committed no acts of aggression against anyone. Perhaps we can reach some sort of agreement." The alien response was swift and dismissive. "There will be no agreement. This system contains resources required for Dominion expansion. Your presence is no longer tolerated. You have 24 hours to evacuate all personnel and equipment. Down." On the surface, Jake Morrison called an emergency meeting of the Colony Council. The meeting hall filled with worried colonists as word spread about the alien ultimatum. Jake explained the situation as clearly as he could, though he barely understood it himself. Dr. Lisa Carter spoke up from the crowd. "Where are we supposed to go? This is our home. We have crops in the field, businesses, schools. You can't just pack up 50,000 people in 24 hours. Ben Hughes had been calculating evacuation possibilities. "Even if we could get everyone to the spaceport, we don't have enough ships to transport 50,000 people. Our largest cargo vessels can carry maybe a few hundred passengers each." Kyle Watson stood to address the crowd. "I've requested permission to send a message to Earth, asking for guidance and assistance. These aliens call themselves the Zephyrian Dominion. I've never heard of them before, which suggests they're from outside our usual contact zones." The alien commander's voice cut through the meeting hall speakers as Amy patched through another transmission. We have analyzed your transportation capabilities. They are insufficient for complete evacuation within the specified time frame. This does not concern us. Our claim to this system takes effect in 24 hours regardless of your compliance. Phi. Meaning was clear and terrifying. The aliens were not interested in whether the humans could actually leave. They wanted the system, and they were prepared to take it with or without the colonists aboard. Elena Ross continued trying to negotiate from her position near the alien fleet. Our homeworld needs time to coordinate an evacuation of this size. We request an extension of the deadline to allow for proper civilian evacuation. Your request is denied, came the immediate response. The deadline stands. This conversation is concluded. Kyle worked frantically to compose a message to Earth. The transmission would take weeks to reach human space, and a response would take just as long. By then, whatever was going to happen on New Haven would be long over. Amy began broadcasting continuous distress signals on all frequencies, hoping that some passing ship might relay the message faster than direct transmission to Earth. The chances were slim, but it was better than nothing. Ben Hughes gathered the colony's security personnel, all 6 of them. They began distributing the few weapons available and organizing evacuation procedures. It was a hopeless task, but Ben refused to give up without trying. As night fell on New Haven, the alien ships remained in orbit like vultures waiting for carrion. Their massive hulls blocked out sections of the star field, a constant reminder of the threat hanging over the colony. Families gathered in their homes, holding their children close and wondering what the morning would bring. Some packed what? Belongings they could carry, though there was nowhere to go. Others simply tried to continue their normal routines, as if denial could make the nightmare disappear. Jake Morrison spent the night in the communications center, hoping against hope that some solution would present itself. Kyle Watson worked beside him, composing diplomatic messages that would probably never be read. Amy Johnson maintained her vigil at the communications console, still broadcasting their desperate calls for help. The Zephyrian Dominion ships waited. In perfect formation, their weapons trained on the planet below. They had delivered their ultimatum and expected it to be obeyed. The concept that inferior beings might resist their will was not something they had seriously considered. As dawn approached on New Haven, the deadline drew near. 50,000 human lives hung in the balance, dependent on the mercy of aliens, who had already demonstrated they possessed none. The colonists faced their darkest hour, unaware that their message to Earth would eventually trigger the largest military response in human history. The 24-hour deadline expired at dawn. Jake Morrison stood in the colony headquarters, surrounded by his staff and the colony council. They had spent the night trying to coordinate some kind of evacuation, but it was impossible. The few ships available could only carry a tiny fraction of the population. Kyle Watson had tried everything he could think of to reach a peaceful solution. He had offered the aliens mining rights to the outer planets in the system. He had proposed a gradual evacuation schedule. He had even offered to relocate the colony to another world if the Dominion would provide transportation. Every proposal was rejected without consideration. Commander Elena Ross remained in orbit with the patrol ship, hoping her presence might deter the aliens from immediate violence. Her ship's scanners showed that the Dominion vessels had powered up their weapons systems. Massive energy readings indicated firepower far beyond anything she had ever seen. Amy Johnson detected the first energy discharge on her instruments. "Jake, they're charging weapons. Multiple energy signatures building across their fleet." Ben Hughes grabbed the emergency communication system. All colonists, this is Security Chief Hughes. Take immediate shelter in the nearest building. This is not a drill. Take shelter now! The first blast hit the colony's main power station. The explosion was visible from orbit as a brilliant flash of light, followed by a massive fireball. The station vaporized instantly, along with the 12 technicians who had been trying to maintain essential services until the last moment. Jake felt the building shake as more energy beams struck targets across the colony. Through the windows, he could see the Agricultural Research Center exploding in a column of flame. Dr. Lisa Carter was in that building, along with her entire research team and a classroom full of students. "The shields!" Ben shouted over the noise of explosions. "We need to activate the colony shields!" Amy's hands flew over her control panel, but the response was devastating. "The power station is gone. Without main power, the shields won't activate." Elena Ross watched in horror from orbit as the alien fleet systematically destroyed every major structure in the colony. The school, the hospital, the manufacturing center, the spaceport. Each building disappeared in a flash of energy and debris. This is Elena Ross to any Dominion vessel. "You're killing civilians. There are children down there," she transmitted desperately. The alien response was cold and emotionless. Resistance was anticipated. Destruction of inferior life forms is acceptable to achieve strategic objectives. Elena realized with growing horror that this was not punishment for failed evacuation. This was deliberate genocide. The aliens had never intended to allow the colonists to leave. They wanted the humans dead. Ben Hughes led a desperate evacuation effort, trying to get people to the emergency shelters scattered around the colony. But the shelters had been designed for natural disasters, not military bombardment. They offered little protection against the weapons being used against them. The medical center exploded just as Dr. Sarah Williams was evacuating her patients. The elderly and infirm who could not move quickly enough were killed instantly. Sarah herself was caught in the blast, dying alongside the people she had spent years caring for. Jake tried to coordinate rescue efforts from the headquarters building, but communications across the colony were failing as relay stations were destroyed. Reports came in sporadically, entire neighborhoods disappearing, families trapped in burning buildings, children separated from their parents in the chaos. Amy worked frantically to send out final distress signals before their equipment was destroyed. She had one last message to transmit, a desperate plea for justice from a dying world. "This is New Haven Colony. We are under attack by the Zephyrian Dominion. They are committing genocide against our civilian population. 50,000 people, women, children, families, all innocent. If anyone receives this, please remember us. Please make them pay for what they've done here." The communications center exploded a moment after Amy finished the transmission. She was thrown against the wall by the blast, her last sight being the sparks flying from her ruined equipment. Elena Ross made the hardest decision of her life. Her patrol ship could not fight the alien fleet, but she could try to evacuate some survivors. She brought her ship down through the atmosphere, dodging energy beams while searching for signs of life. The colony's emergency pods had been scattered around the settlement for exactly this kind of disaster. Ben Hughes had managed to get several dozen people into the pods before the ground-based launcher systems were destroyed. The pods shot into space automatically, carrying their precious cargo away from the devastation. Kyle Watson was among the survivors in the emergency pods. He had been helping children board the pods when the building around them collapsed. The pods sealed automatically and launched, carrying 12 people, including Kyle and 6 children whose parents had not made it to safety. Elena's ship picked up as many emergency pods as she could locate, but there were so few. Her cargo bay, filled with survivors, perhaps 200 people out of 50,000. The scale of the loss was overwhelming. From orbit, Elena could see the systematic destruction of everything humans had built on New Haven. The wheat fields burned, sending smoke high into the atmosphere. The town center was a crater surrounded by rubble. Bodies lay scattered in the streets, victims of the merciless bombardment. The Dominion ships showed no signs of stopping. They continued firing even after all organized resistance had ended. They targeted individual buildings, making sure nothing remained intact. This was not just conquest. It was the complete erasure of human presence from the world. Ben Hughes had made it to one of the last functioning emergency pods. As his pod launched into space, he looked back at the world where he had spent the best years of his life. New Haven was dying, consumed by fire and destruction. The agricultural areas that had been the pride of the colony were now burning wastelands. Dr. Lisa Carter's research, years of work to develop better crops and feed, more people, was reduced to ash and smoke. The children's playground, where laughter had echoed just hours before, was now a smoldering crater. Elena Ross tried to contact the Dominion fleet one final time. "You've destroyed everything. There's nothing left. Please stop the killing." Elimination. "Process will continue until no trace of inferior presence remains," came the response. "This system now belongs to the Zephyrian Dominion." The bombing continued for 6 more hours. The aliens made sure every structure was completely destroyed, every trace of human civilization erased. They burned the forests where colonists had gone hiking. They shattered the monuments the colonists had built to remember their journey from Earth. When the destruction finally ended, New Haven was unrecognizable. The world that had been green and growing just one day earlier was now gray and dead. Smoke rose from thousands of fires. The rivers ran red with ash and debris. Elena Ross gathered the survivors aboard her ship and began the long journey to the nearest human settlement. In her cargo bay, she carried all that remained of 50,000 people, just under 300 souls who had witnessed the complete destruction of their world. Kyle Watson helped care for the children who had lost their parents. Ben Hughes organized the survivors and tried to provide what comfort he could. All of them carried the weight of what they had seen, the knowledge that their friends and families were gone forever. The Dominion fleet remained in orbit for 3 more days, scanning the planet to ensure complete destruction. They showed no emotion, no regret for the lives they had taken. To them, the elimination of New Haven was simply a necessary step in their expansion. When the aliens finally left, they left behind a dead world and a message that would soon reach Earth. A message that would change the course of galactic history and unleash a response that the Zephyrian Dominion could never have imagined. 3 weeks after the destruction of New Haven, Amy Johnson's final transmission reached Earth Command. The message arrived during the night shift at the Deep Space Communications Center in Geneva. Lieutenant Marcus Bell was monitoring routine communications when the distress signal came through the quantum relay network. The transmission was broken and filled with static, but the words were clear enough to chill Marcus to the bone. He immediately contacted his supervisor, then called Admiral Peter Kane at home. Within an hour, the most senior military and political leaders on Earth were gathering for an emergency briefing. Admiral Peter Kane had been expecting to review routine fleet exercises that morning. Instead, he found himself staring at a transcript that described the complete annihilation of 50,000 human civilians. The words seemed impossible to believe, but the transmission was authentic and the source was verified. President Catherine Bell arrived at Earth Command Headquarters along with the Global Defense Council. As leader of the unified Earth government, Catherine had handled many crises, but nothing had prepared her for this. She read the transmission twice before the full meaning sank in. 50,000 people, she said quietly. They killed 50,000 civilians without warning, without cause. Intelligence Director Steve Price was already pulling up every file they had on the region around New Haven. The information was sparse. That part of space was considered peaceful and unimportant. No major powers operated there, and human presence was limited to a few small colonies and research stations. "We have no prior contact records with this Zephyrian Dominion," Steve reported. "They're not in any of our diplomatic databases. This appears to be first contact, and they chose to make it with genocide." Defense Minister Jack Thompson began calculating the practical implications. New Haven was weeks away from Earth by the fastest ships available. Any response would take time to organize and longer to deploy. The aliens had chosen their target well, remote enough that help could not arrive in time. Admiral Kane studied the star charts showing the location of New Haven and the surrounding systems. "We need to know if this was an isolated incident or part of a larger campaign. If they're moving through human space systematically—" "There are 14 other human colonies in that sector," Steve Price confirmed grimly. "All of them small, all of them defenseless. If this Dominion continues their expansion, we could be looking at hundreds of thousands of casualties." President Bell felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. As elected leader of humanity, the safety of every human in the galaxy was ultimately her responsibility. The colonists of New Haven had died calling for help that never came. Communications began flowing between Earth and the scattered human colonies. Emergency messages went out, warning settlements to prepare for possible evacuation. The few military vessels in the outer regions were ordered to begin reconnaissance missions to locate and track the alien threat. The news of New Haven's destruction was initially classified, but word began to spread through government channels. Military personnel who had friends or family on the colony received the devastating confirmation that their loved ones were dead. The loss became personal for thousands of people across Earth's military. Captain Danny Miller was in the middle of training exercises when he received word that his sister and her family had been living on New Haven. Jessica Miller had moved to the colony 5 years earlier with her husband and 2 young children. Now, they were gone, murdered by aliens that Danny had never heard of. Similar scenes played out across Earth's military. Soldiers, sailors, pilots, and support staff learned that people they cared about had been killed in what could only be described as an act of pure evil. The desire for justice, for revenge, spread through the ranks like wildfire. Fleet Admiral Nancy Green was called to Earth Command to brief the leadership on humanity's military capabilities. As the senior military officer in Earth's fleet, Nancy had access to information that few people knew existed. Earth was far from defenseless, despite its peaceful appearance. "How many ships can we deploy?" President Bell asked directly. Nancy reviewed the classified files that detailed Earth's true military strength. "In a full mobilization scenario, we can field approximately 700,000 combat vessels within 1 year." The silence in the room was profound. Even the senior leadership had not known the full extent of Earth's hidden military-industrial complex. The peaceful facade that humanity presented to the galaxy concealed the largest war machine in known space. 700,000 ships? Defense Minister Thompson repeated. How is that possible? Nancy explained the decades-long military buildup that had been hidden from public view. Automated shipyards throughout the solar system could produce vessels at an unprecedented rate. Weapon stockpiles existed that could arm entire fleets. Millions of trained personnel were ready to crew the ships. We've been preparing for the possibility of major interstellar conflict since the early days of human expansion, Nancy continued. The peaceful nature of first contact with other species led us to maintain a low military profile, but we never stopped building our defensive capabilities. Intelligence Director Steve Price presented what little they knew about the Zephyrian Dominion. The aliens appeared to be a coalition of 3 species that had conquered several star systems in the past decade. Their technology was advanced, but probably not superior to humanity's best weapons. They made a critical error, Steve concluded. They chose to test their strength against what they perceived as a weak target. They have no idea what they've awakened. President Bell called for a vote by the Global Defense Council. The decision was whether to authorize a full military response against the Zephyrian Dominion. For the first time in the history of the unified Earth government, the vote was unanimous. The authorization is granted, President Bell announced formally. Earth will respond to this act of genocide with overwhelming force. The Zephyrian Dominion will face the consequences of their actions. Admiral Kane began immediate preparations for the largest military operation in human history. The hidden shipyards began accelerating production schedules. Military reservists across Earth and the colonies received activation orders. The machinery of war that had waited in silence for decades began to move. The public announcement came 12 hours later. President Bell addressed the planet from the steps of the Global Government Building in Geneva. The speech was broadcast across human space and transmitted to every colony and outpost. Citizens of Earth and humanity's colonies, President Bell began. Yesterday we learned that the colony of New Haven was completely destroyed by an alien force calling itself the Zephyrian Dominion. 50,000 of our fellow humans were murdered without warning or justification. The reaction across Earth was immediate and intense. Demonstrations filled the streets, not in protest, but in support of military action. Citizens demanded justice for the dead colonists. Enlistment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers wanting to join the war effort. The Zephyrian Dominion believes that humanity is weak because we choose peace over conflict, President Bell continued. They will learn that our peaceful nature is not weakness, but strength. And when that strength is turned toward war, it is unstoppable. Ships began, moving throughout the solar system as the mobilization order went into effect. Massive vessels emerged from hidden bases in the asteroid belt. Shipyards that had appeared to be mining facilities revealed their true purpose. The greatest military force in galactic history began to assemble. The survivors of New Haven, still making their way to safety, had no idea that their desperate message had triggered such a response. They traveled through space carrying the weight of their loss, unaware that Earth was preparing to move heaven and Earth to avenge them. The Zephyrian Dominion continued their expansion, unaware that they had made the greatest mistake in their civilization's history. They had murdered 50,000 humans, and now 700,000 human warships were coming for them. The transformation of human space began within hours of President Bell's announcement. Hidden facilities across the solar system revealed themselves as the greatest military-industrial complex in galactic history came to life. What the rest of the galaxy saw as peaceful mining operations and research stations were actually the foundation of humanity's true power. Fleet Admiral Nancy Green stood in the command center of Arsenal Station, a massive facility hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. For 50 years, Arsenal Station had masqueraded as a mineral processing plant. In reality, it was the central coordination hub for humanity's military buildup. "Activate all production facilities," Nancy ordered. "I want every shipyard, every factory, every automated assembly line running at maximum capacity. We have a war to prepare for." Throughout the solar system, similar scenes played out. On Luna's far side, enormous hangars opened to reveal finished warships by the hundreds. The industrial complexes on Mars shifted from producing civilian goods to manufacturing military hardware. Even Earth's space elevators began carrying military cargo instead of commercial freight. Captain Chris Parker reported to the newly activated Darwin shipyards near Pluto. Chris had been commanding a merchant vessel just days earlier, but his reserve commission had been activated along with millions of others. The transformation from civilian to military mindset was swift and complete. "Welcome to the largest shipyard in human space," his new first officer explained as they approached the facility. "We can build 100 destroyers per day when running at full capacity." Chris stared at the massive construction complex. Automated. Assembly lines stretched for kilometers, each one capable of producing complete warships from raw materials. The scale was beyond anything he had imagined possible. Defense Minister Jack Thompson coordinated the mobilization from Earth Command. His job was to ensure that every aspect of the war machine functioned smoothly. Raw materials had to be transported, workers had to be assigned, and production schedules had to be synchronized across hundreds of facilities. "Steel production is up 400%, his aide reported. "Rare metal mining has increased by 600%. We're stripping asteroids as fast as the mining ships can move." The automation was crucial to the speed of the mobilization. Robots and artificial intelligence systems handled most of the actual construction work. Humans provided oversight and quality control, but the machines did the heavy lifting. This allowed production to continue around the clock without pause. Lieutenant Commander Mary Foster found herself assigned to the weapons testing facility on Titan. Her job was to oversee the final checks on armaments before they were installed on ships. The scale of the operation was staggering. Millions of missiles, energy weapons, and defensive systems flowing through the facility every day. These plasma cannons can vaporize anything smaller than a cruiser with a single shot, the chief engineer explained as they toured the testing range. The new missiles can track targets across multiple star systems and adjust their course mid-flight. The technology being deployed was decades ahead of what most species possessed. Humanity had invested heavily in military research while maintaining the appearance of a peaceful civilization. The combination of advanced automation and superior weapons gave the human fleet capabilities that their enemies could not match. Personnel training proceeded at an unprecedented pace. Veterans like Captain Danny Miller found themselves promoted rapidly as experienced officers were needed to command the new ships. Danny went from patrol boat captain to destroyer squadron commander in less than 2 weeks. "You'll have 12 ships under your command," Admiral Kane explained during Danny's briefing. "Each destroyer is more powerful than anything the aliens have seen. Your job is to make sure they never forget what happens when you attack human civilians." The draft was unnecessary. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers faster than they could be processed. Young people wanted to serve their species. Veterans came out of retirement to contribute their experience. Even civilians with no military background demanded roles in the war effort. Dr. Rachel Thompson left her research position at the University of Mars to join the Fleet Medical Corps. Her specialty in trauma surgery would be needed when the fighting began. "They killed children," she told her colleagues. "I'm going to make sure our people can keep fighting until every last alien pays for what they did." The logistics of moving 700,000 ships required careful planning. Fuel depots were established along the route to Dominion space. Supply ships were loaded with spare parts and ammunition. Mobile repair facilities were prepared to maintain the fleet during the long campaign ahead. Admiral Kane reviewed the fleet composition from his headquarters on Earth. The numbers were staggering even to him. 200,000 destroyers formed the backbone of the force. 100,000 cruisers provided heavy firepower. 50,000 battleships served as mobile fortresses. Support vessels made up the remainder. Each battleship carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet, the tactical officer reported. The cruisers can engage entire fleets simultaneously. The destroyers are fast enough to hunt down anything that tries to escape. The industrial effort required to build such a fleet was beyond what most civilizations could manage. Earth's population had been unknowingly supporting this buildup for generations. Taxes that citizens thought went to infrastructure actually funded weapons research. Mining operations that appeared commercial were actually gathering military resources. Captain Lisa Morgan took command of the heavy cruiser Victory as it rolled out of the shipyards. The ship was brand new, equipped with the latest technology and crewed by eager volunteers. Lisa had lost friends on New Haven, and she was determined to make the aliens pay. "All systems are optimal," her chief engineer reported. "Weapons are fully charged, engines are running perfectly, and the crew is ready for action." The speed of the mobilization surprised even Earth's leadership. What they had estimated would take a year was accomplished in 6 months. The hidden infrastructure that had been built over decades made rapid deployment possible. Everything had been planned and prepared in advance. Communication networks linked every part of the operation. Quantum communicators allowed instant coordination across the solar system. Artificial intelligence systems managed the complex logistics of feeding, arming, and moving the largest military force in history. General Frank Davis commanded the ground. Forces that would occupy conquered Dominion territory. His troops were equipped with powered armor and weapons that could level cities. The alien populations would learn that resistance was futile. "We're not just going to defeat them," Frank told his officers. "We're going to break them so completely that no alien species will ever again consider attacking humans." The Psychological Warfare Division prepared messages that would be broadcast to Dominion worlds. The aliens would learn about New Haven and understand exactly why the human fleet was coming for them. Fear would be as much a weapon as plasma cannons and missiles. Intelligence gathered from the few encounters with Dominion forces suggested they had approximately 50,000 ships total. The ratio was 14 human vessels for every alien ship. The mathematics of the coming war were simple and brutal. Fleet Admiral Nancy Green stood on the bridge of the flagship Retribution as the final preparations were completed. Around her, the greatest war fleet in galactic history assembled in formation. 700,000 ships stretched across space, ready to deliver justice for the dead of New Haven. "All ships report ready for departure," the communications officer announced. Nancy looked out at the massive fleet under her command. Each ship represented humanity's determination to protect its people. The aliens had made one critical error. They had underestimated the species they chose to attack. "Signal the fleet," Nancy ordered. "We depart for Dominion space in 1 hour. The Zephyrian Dominion wanted a war. Now they're going to get one." The human armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Dominion space like a force of nature unleashed. 700,000 ships materialized in perfect formation, their presence immediately detected by every sensor array within 3-star systems. The Zephyrian Dominion was about to learn the true meaning of overwhelming force. Admiral Peter Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Retribution, studying the tactical displays showing known Dominion positions. Intelligence had identified 12 major military installations and 47 colonized worlds under Dominion control. All of them were now targets for liberation. "Signal the fleet," Admiral Kane ordered. "Operation Thunderbolt is now active. All task forces will proceed to their assigned targets simultaneously. Show no mercy to military targets, but protect civilian populations." The human fleet divided into multiple attack groups, each one larger than the entire Dominion Navy. The strategy was simple but effective. Hit everything at once with such overwhelming force that organized resistance would be impossible. Captain Danny Miller commanded Destroyer Squadron 7, 12 ships tasked with eliminating the Dominion Naval base at Kepler Station. As his squadron approached the target, Danny could see the alien defensive fleet moving to intercept them. 40 Dominion warships against 12 human destroyers seemed like poor odds until the shooting started. "All ships, weapons free," Danny transmitted. "Target their capital ships first, then work your way down." The human destroyers opened fire from extreme range with their advanced plasma cannons. The alien ships had no idea what hit them. 3 Dominion battleships simply vanished in brilliant flashes of light as the human weapons tore through their shields and armor like paper. Lieutenant Commander Mary Foster watched from the bridge of the destroyer Vengeance as the alien fleet tried to return fire. Their weapons were decades behind human technology. Energy beams that should have crippled human ships barely scratched the advanced armor plating. "Their shields are failing across the board," the tactical officer reported. "Looks like they can't handle the frequency modulation on our weapons." The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it was over, the entire Dominion defense fleet was debris floating in space. Not a single human ship had taken significant damage. The technological gap was even wider than Earth's scientists had predicted. General Frank Davis led the ground assault on the Dominion colony world of Zarion Prime. His troops descended from orbit in armored dropships while human warships provided orbital bombardment of military targets. The alien defenders had never faced anything like human combined arms warfare. "Resistance is minimal," Frank reported to Admiral Kane. "Their ground forces are armed with projectile weapons and have no effective anti-armor capabilities. We'll have the planet secured within 12 hours. Similar reports came in from attack groups throughout Dominion space. Human forces achieved complete surprise and overwhelming superiority in every engagement. The aliens had built their empire by conquering weaker species, but they had never faced an opponent with superior technology and unlimited determination. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the heavy cruiser Victory as part of the task force attacking the Dominion homeworld. The alien capital was heavily defended with orbital platforms and a large fleet, but the human advantage in numbers and technology made the outcome inevitable. 67 enemy ships detected, her sensor officer reported. "Multiple orbital defense platforms with heavy weapons." Lisa studied the tactical display calmly. Her task force included 300 human warships against 67 alien vessels. The mathematics were clear. All ships advance in formation. Target the orbital platforms first, Then engage their fleet. Make this quick and clean. The battle for the Dominion homeworld lasted less than an hour. Human missiles tracked and destroyed every orbital platform, while the main fleet engaged the alien ships. The superior range and accuracy of human weapons allowed them to destroy targets before the aliens could even return fire effectively. Captain Tony White led a ground battalion in the assault on the Dominion capital city. His troops advanced through the streets in powered armor, while alien forces tried desperately to slow their progress. The difference in equipment and training was overwhelming. "Their weapons can't penetrate our armor," Tony reported to his superiors. "We're taking prisoners wherever possible, but most of them are surrendering without a fight." The Dominion military command structure collapsed within days of the human assault beginning. Their forces had been distributed across multiple star systems to control conquered territory, but this left them vulnerable to defeat in detail by the concentrated human fleet. Commander Elena Ross, one of the survivors of New Haven, had volunteered to serve as a liaison with liberated populations. Her job was to identify species that had been conquered by the Dominion and help coordinate their liberation. "The Vorthak people have been enslaved for 30 years, Elena reported after interviewing refugees on a liberated world. "The Dominion used them for manual labor in dangerous mining operations. They're eager to help us locate other slave populations." Intelligence gathered from captured Dominion databases revealed the full extent of their crimes. Dozens of species had been conquered and enslaved. Entire populations had been relocated or eliminated to make room for Dominion expansion. The aliens had built their empire on genocide and slavery. Fleet Admiral Nancy Green coordinated the overall campaign from her command ship. The speed of human victory was exceeding all projections. Dominion forces were surrendering faster than they could be processed as prisoners. Estimated time to complete victory has been revised to 6 months, her chief of staff reported. Dominion fleet strength has been reduced by over 80% in the first 2 weeks of fighting. The psychological impact on the Dominion was as important as the military defeats. Their entire worldview was based on their superiority over other species. The sudden appearance of a vastly superior human force shattered their confidence and will to fight. Dr. Rachel Thompson worked in field hospitals treating both human and alien wounded. The human casualties were remarkably light due to their technological advantages, while alien casualties were massive due to the ferocity of human attacks. "I've never seen anything like this," she wrote in her personal log. "Our weapons are so advanced that most enemy casualties are simply vaporized. The few wounded we see are from accidents or equipment failures, not enemy action." The liberation of enslaved populations became a major part of the human campaign. Species that had suffered under Dominion rule provided valuable intelligence about remaining enemy strongholds and helped guide human forces to hidden bases and supply depots. Captain Chris Parker commanded a squadron tasked with hunting down fleeing Dominion ships. His vessels used their superior speed and sensors to track enemy forces attempting to escape into deep space. None were allowed to escape. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 5, his sensor operator reported. "Single Dominion cruiser attempting to reach the outer system." Chris studied the tactical display. His squadron of 12 destroyers could easily handle one enemy cruiser, but he wanted to make sure there were no other ships hiding nearby. Launch reconnaissance drones, full sensor sweep of the surrounding area. I don't want any surprises. The hunt was methodical and thorough. Human forces swept through every star system under Dominion control, eliminating military targets and liberating conquered populations. The alien empire that had taken decades to build was being dismantled in a matter of months. Admiral Kane received regular updates on the progress of the campaign. The reports were uniformly positive. Human forces were achieving all objectives ahead of schedule with minimal casualties. The Dominion military was simply unable to compete with human technology and tactics. Remaining Dominion fleet strength is estimated at less than 5,000 ships, the intelligence officer reported. They're scattered across dozens of systems, with no central coordination. Organized resistance has effectively ceased. The war that the Zephyrian Dominion had started by destroying New Haven was turning into the complete destruction of their civilization. The aliens had fatally underestimated the species they chose to attack, and now they were paying the ultimate price for their mistake. As human forces pressed deeper into Dominion territory, the scope of alien crimes became clear. Mass graves, slave camps, and extermination facilities were discovered on world after world. The evidence justified every aspect of humanity's overwhelming response. The Zephyrian Dominion's first attempt at surrender came 6 months after the human assault began. Admiral Peter Kane received the transmission while reviewing reports from the final stages of the campaign. The alien message was desperate, offering immediate cessation of hostilities and full reparations for New Haven. "Tell them we will accept nothing less than unconditional surrender," Kane replied coldly. "Complete disarmament, war crimes trials for all military leadership, and submission to human authority over all former Dominion territory." The alien response revealed the depth of their desperation. They agreed to everything except the war crimes trials, pleading that their military leaders had acted according to their cultural norms. This only served to reinforce humanity's determination to see justice done. General Frank Davis commanded the final ground operations on the 3 Dominion homeworlds. His forces had systematically occupied every major population center, dismantling the alien government and military structure piece by piece. The speed of the conquest had left the Dominion leadership in shock. "They still don't understand what happened to them," Frank reported to Admiral Kane. "Their entire military doctrine was based on fighting primitive species with simple weapons. They had no contingency for facing superior technology. The collapse of organized Dominion resistance had taken only 8 months, but the liberation of enslaved populations would take much longer. Human forces discovered slave camps and labor installations on over 100 worlds, some containing species that had been captive for generations. Commander Tony White led the liberation effort on Sardak Fu, where the Dominion had operated massive mining complexes using slave labor from 6 different species. The conditions his troops found were horrifying even by wartime standards. "Medical teams are overwhelmed," Tony reported. "Malnutrition, disease, and untreated injuries are endemic among the slave populations. Some of these people haven't seen sunlight in decades." Captain Lisa Morgan supervised the occupation of the former Dominion capital. Her job was to establish human administration over the conquered territory while maintaining order among the defeated alien population. The task required a careful balance of strength and restraint. "The civilian population is cooperating," Lisa reported. "They seem to understand that resistance is futile. Many are actually relieved that the war is over, even if it means foreign occupation." The scope of Dominion war crimes became clear as human forces gained access to government records and military databases. The destruction of New Haven was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic campaign of genocide against dozens of species. Dr. Rachel Thompson worked with refugee populations, documenting the extent of Dominion atrocities for the war crimes tribunals that would follow. Her medical expertise helped her understand the full horror of what the aliens had done to their victims. They didn't just kill people, Rachel wrote in her reports. They conducted medical experiments, forced breeding programs, and psychological torture on an industrial scale. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. The three species that comprised the Dominion began turning on each other as their empire collapsed. The Zephyrians blamed the Mordak for starting the war with humans. The Mordak accused the Telic of providing faulty intelligence about human capabilities. The alliance that had conquered dozens of worlds fell apart in mutual recriminations. Fleet Admiral Nancy Green established the Terran hegemony as the new governing authority over former Dominion space. The human administration would ensure that liberated species could develop their own governments while preventing any resurgence of aggressive militarism. "We're not here as conquerors," Nancy announced to the various species under human protection. "We're here to ensure that what happened to our people on New Haven never happens to anyone again." The war crimes trials began on the liberated world of Korath, chosen for its symbolic importance as the first world to be freed from Dominion control. Captain Danny Miller served as a military observer, watching as alien leaders were held accountable for their crimes. "The evidence against them is overwhelming," Danny wrote to his family on Earth. "They documented everything they did, apparently proud of their efficiency in eliminating inferior species. Now that documentation will be used to convict them." Kyle Saul. Watson, one of the survivors of New Haven, testified at the trials about the destruction of his home. His account of the Dominion's deliberate targeting of civilians helped establish the legal framework for genocide charges against the alien leadership. "They told us there would be no negotiation," Kyle testified. "They said our lives were worthless because we were an inferior species. They wanted us dead. And they took pleasure in our suffering." The Dominion military structure was completely dismantled. Their ships were either destroyed or converted to peaceful purposes under human supervision. Their weapons were confiscated, and their military bases were turned into refugee processing centers. Lieutenant Commander Mary Foster oversaw the destruction of a Dominion weapons facility. The scale of the alien military-industrial complex revealed how seriously they had taken their campaign of conquest. They were mass-producing weapons for continued expansion, Mary reported. Intelligence estimates they were planning to attack at least 12 more star systems, including several with human colonies. The liberated species began forming their own governments under human guidance. The Vorthak people established a democratic council to represent their interests. The Helkin formed a tribal confederation based on their traditional social structure. All of them remained under the protective umbrella of human military power. Captain Elena Ross worked with the new governments to establish trade relationships and mutual defense agreements. Her experience as a New Haven survivor gave her unique credibility with populations that had suffered under alien occupation. "They trust us because we understand what they went through," Elena explained to her superiors. "We know what it's like to lose everything to an aggressive alien force. That shared experience creates a bond that diplomatic protocol never could." The technological disparity between humans and the Dominion became even more apparent during the occupation phase. Human equipment and weapons were so advanced that maintaining order required only a fraction of the forces that traditional military doctrine would suggest. General Frank Davis established permanent human garrisons on key worlds to prevent any resurgence of militarism. His troops were welcomed by liberated populations who saw them as protectors rather than occupiers. "The locals are helping us identify former Dominion collaborators," Frank reported. "They want justice for what was done to them, but they also want protection against future threats. The economic reconstruction of former Dominion territory proceeded rapidly under human administration. Earth's advanced technology and industrial capacity allowed for rapid rebuilding of infrastructure damaged during the war. Dr. Sarah Johnson, a specialist in alien cultures, worked to preserve the heritage of liberated species that had been suppressed under Dominion rule. Many cultures had been forced to abandon their traditions and adopt Dominion customs. We're helping them rediscover who they were before the conquest, Sarah explained. Languages, art forms, religious practices, and social structures that were banned under the Dominion are being revived with human support. The speed and completeness of human victory had shocked the entire galaxy. Species that had considered the Dominion invincible watched in amazement as the alien empire was dismantled in less than 2 years from start to finish. Admiral Kane received reports that other aggressive civilizations were reconsidering their expansion plans in light of humanity's demonstration of power. The destruction of the Dominion had sent a clear message to anyone considering attacks on human colonies. Intelligence indicates that 3 separate species have canceled planned military operations against neutral worlds, Kane reported to Earth Command. Our response to the Dominion has apparently convinced them that aggression is too dangerous. The final Dominion stronghold fell 18 months after the first human ships entered their space. The fortress world of Kratek Prime had been heavily fortified and defended by the last organized Dominion forces, but even their best efforts could not withstand human firepower. Captain Chris Parker led the final assault, his squadron of destroyers, overwhelming the planetary defenses in a matter of hours. The symbolic importance of the victory was not lost on anyone involved in the campaign. "This is for New Haven," Chris transmitted as his ships destroyed the last Dominion weapons platform. 50,000 innocent people who will never be forgotten. The war that began with the murder of 50,000 human civilians ended with the complete destruction of the Zephyrian Dominion and the establishment of human hegemony over a significant portion of the galaxy. The aliens had learned, too late, that humanity's peaceful nature masked the most powerful military force in known space. 5 years after the last shot was fired in the war against the Zephyrian Dominion, Admiral Peter Kane stood once again on New Haven. The world that had been reduced to ash and rubble was now green and growing again, rebuilt as a monument to both human determination and the cost of peace. The memorial at the center of New Haven City bore the names of all 50,000 colonists who had died in the Dominion attack. Jake Morrison's name was there, along with Dr. Lisa Carter, Ben Hughes, Amy Johnson, and all the others who had lived peaceful lives until violence found them. Kyle Watson, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the liberated worlds, placed a wreath at the memorial's base. As one of the few survivors of the original massacre, Kyle carried the weight of speaking for those who could no longer speak for themselves. "They died believing that peace was possible," Kyle said to the assembled crowd. "They were right. Peace is possible, but it must be protected by those strong enough to defend it." The rebuilding of New Haven had been a deliberate choice by Earth's leadership. The world could have been left as a memorial to tragedy, but instead it became a symbol of human resilience. Families from across human space had volunteered to establish new homes on the restored world. Captain Elena Ross commanded the orbital defense station that now protected New Haven. The station was one of hundreds established throughout human space after the war. Never again would human colonies be left defenseless against aggressive aliens. 12 ships approaching the system, her sensor operator reported. "Configuration matches the Talani trade convoy we were expecting." Elena nodded, watching as the Alien merchant vessels approached under the escort of human patrol ships. Trade with other species had expanded dramatically since the end of the war, but it now proceeded under strict human supervision. The Talani were one of many species that had sought alliance with humanity after witnessing the destruction of the Dominion. Their captain transmitted the required identification codes and submitted to inspection by human customs officials. The new order in the galaxy was built on human strength, and everyone understood the rules. General Frank Davis reviewed reports from across the former Dominion territory at his headquarters on Korath. The occupation had evolved into a protectorate system that allowed liberated species to govern themselves while maintaining human military oversight. Crime rates continue to decline, his aide reported. Economic output is up 30% from pre-war levels. The liberated populations are adapting well to self-governance under our protection. The success of the protectorate system had surprised many observers. Species that had been enslaved for generations were learning to govern themselves again, with human guidance. The former slave worlds were becoming productive members of an expanding galactic community. Dr. Rachel Thompson worked at the Medical Research Center on Vorthak Prime, developing treatments for the long-term effects of Dominion oppression. Her research helped heal not just physical wounds, but psychological trauma that had affected entire populations. "We're seeing remarkable recovery rates," Rachel wrote in her latest report. "When people feel safe and valued, they can overcome even the worst experiences. Our job is to maintain that safety." The war crimes trials had concluded 2 years earlier with the conviction of over 3,000 Dominion officials. The trials had established important precedents for international law and demonstrated that even the most powerful individuals could be held accountable for genocide and crimes against humanity. Fleet Admiral Nancy Green commanded the Terran hegemony, Navy, from her headquarters on Luna. The human fleet had been reduced from its wartime peak of 700,000 ships, but still maintained overwhelming superiority over any potential threat. "Intelligence reports indicate no significant military buildups by any known species," Nancy informed the Earth Command staff. "Our demonstration of force appears to have convinced potential aggressors that military solutions are not viable." The psychological impact of humanity's response to the Dominion attack had fundamentally changed galactic politics. Species that had once considered themselves powerful now understood that humans were the dominant force in known space. This understanding had led to unprecedented peace and cooperation. Captain Danny Miller commanded the exploration vessel Discovery, as it surveyed systems beyond former Dominion space. His mission was to make contact with new species and assess their intentions toward humanity and its allies. The exploration program was part of humanity's effort to prevent future conflicts through early diplomacy. New contact established with the Helix Confederation, Danny reported to Earth Command. They appear to be a peaceful trading federation with no military ambitions, recommending full diplomatic relations. The expansion of human influence continued through exploration and diplomacy rather than conquest. Other species voluntarily sought alliance with humanity, recognizing the benefits of protection and trade relationships. The galaxy was becoming more interconnected and peaceful under human leadership. Captain Lisa Morgan served as the military governor of the former Dominion homeworld. Her job was to oversee the transition of the defeated species to peaceful civilian government while ensuring they posed no future threat to galactic stability. The younger generation of Zephyrians is adapting well to democratic institutions, Lisa reported. They seemed genuinely committed to rejecting the militaristic culture that led to the war. The re-education of former Dominion populations was proceeding slowly but successfully. Children who had been raised to believe in alien superiority were learning about equality and cooperation. The process would take generations, but progress was evident. Captain Tony White led the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, a multinational organization that maintained order throughout human-protected space. The force included volunteers from dozens of liberated species who worked alongside human personnel to prevent conflicts. Joint patrols with Vorthak security forces intercepted smugglers attempting to transport illegal weapons, Tony reported. The cooperation between our species continues to improve. The integration of alien personnel into human-led organizations had been controversial initially, but the results spoke for themselves. Former slaves had become trusted partners in maintaining the peace they had helped to achieve. Communications. Officer Amy Park monitored the quantum communication network that linked all human colonies and protectorates. The network, named in honor of Amy Johnson, who had died sending New Haven's final message, ensured that no human settlement would ever again face destruction in isolation. All colonies report normal status, Amy announced during the daily briefing. No distress signals, no unusual activities, no threats detected anywhere in human space. The memorial on New Haven bore a simple inscription that had become humanity's unofficial motto in the post-war galaxy. They chose war. We chose victory. The words reminded everyone that humanity's peaceful nature was a choice, not a weakness. Kyle Watson often brought visiting diplomats to see the memorial. The ambassadors from other species would read the names of the dead and understand why. Humanity had responded so decisively to the Dominion attack. We could have chosen to make this entire sector uninhabitable, Kyle would explain to the visitors. We could have exterminated every species that had ever cooperated with the Dominion. Instead, we chose justice and reconstruction. But we also chose to ensure that such choices would never be forced upon us again. President Catherine Bell, now in her third term leading the unified Earth government, addressed the anniversary gathering on New Haven. Her speech was broadcast across human space and translated into dozens of alien languages. 5 years ago, 50,000 of our people died here because aggressive aliens believed that humanity was weak, President Bell said. Today, this world blooms again as proof that we are not weak. We are strong enough to defend peace, strong enough to punish evil, and strong enough to build a better galaxy for all sentient beings. The transformation of galactic civilization had exceeded all expectations. Trade flourished under human protection. Scientific cooperation advanced knowledge across species boundaries. Art and culture were exchanged freely between worlds that had once been enemies. Admiral Kane, now retired but still influential in military circles, watched the ceremony from his home on Earth. The man who had planned and executed the largest military campaign in human history took satisfaction not in the destruction he had overseen, but in the peace that destruction had made possible. The children playing in New Haven streets had been born after the war. They grew up in a galaxy where aggressive species thought twice before attacking peaceful colonies. They would inherit a universe where humanity's strength protected not just human worlds, but dozens of species that had found safety under the Terran hegemony. As the sun set over New Haven, Kyle Watson stood once more at the memorial. The names of the dead caught the last light of day, a reminder of the price paid for the peace that now blessed the galaxy. "You are not forgotten," Kyle whispered to the memorial. "You never will be. Your sacrifice made all of this possible." The galaxy had learned its lesson well. Humanity appeared peaceful by choice, not necessity. And when that choice was taken away, as it had been on New Haven, the response was swift, overwhelming, and absolute. In the new galactic order, peace was maintained not through weakness, but